Good evening, everyone, and I welcome you all to the valedictory session of the International Conference on Tribes in Transition. And this is just a reminder that we are again live on our YouTube channel, and the session is being recorded. And this is a valedictory session, and Professor Esther CM is our valedictory speaker. Uh, Professor Esther CM is a professor in the Department of English, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, and has been involved in trying to understand the orality that constitutes the foundation of Khasi society and other hill communities in Northeast India. Esther CM is a bilingual writer. Of her publications, these include 3 volumes of poetry, oral scriptings of wit and wisdom, of follies and frailties, many sides of many stories, and a play in Khasi entitled Ka Naam. The oral discourse in Khasi folk narrative attempts to do a rereading of the oral in terms of the contemporary. She has written 2 children's books entitled Ka Jingwa Mare Kobki. Sorry, ma'am, if I'm pronouncing it
It's all
wrong.
right. It's all right.
And Race of the Rivers, both published by the Tulika Publishers in 2014. She is also a member of the National Editorial Collective of PLSI. Ma'am, we are so privileged to have you as a valedictory speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much. And when I don't deserve this, but anyway, let's hope that what I'll say, what I'm going to talk about now will be something that I can share with all of you, because as I said, when I was listening to all the papers, what went on in my mind is the fact that I am going to speak from within the community. So I will not be in a position to be able to speak in a very objective way, because I'm going to talk about the attempts of people from within my own community to keep the oral alive in its digital form. And what I've done is I have taken the work of 3 young Khasi women. I have deliberately chosen young people because I have tried to see how young people have reacted to the changes that have been going on. And these are 3 people who have actually decided to stay on and to hold on to their oralities. So I begin my paper. I feel honored to be here amongst all of you as valedictory speaker for this international conference. And I wish to thank the organizers, especially Ivy, whom I've known, who's the convener of this conference. She's been my friend and colleague from the PLSI, and we've shared some wonderful moments together. I can't help but mention Professor Anvita Abhi's keynote address. It was so informative and so encouraging, as I said, for insiders like us, that there are actually opportunities for the oral to survive in the digital platform. And all the sessions have been very thought-provoking. And as I said, when I looked at my paper, I was hoping, I wish I could rewrite it. But since I can't rewrite it, I'll read it as it is. As I said, since Ivy requested me to bring in insights from Northeast India, I have chosen to speak about the changing face of the oral within my community, which is the Khasi community. And I have selected the works of 3 young Khasi women, educated, Shillong-centric, who had enough opportunities to have enabled them to make a literate, successful life. I deliberately use the word literate as opposed to oral. To make a literate, successful life beyond the boundaries of their small world. But I'll talk about them later. At the end of such interesting sessions with so many scholars discussing issues vital to our small indigenous communities and touching me personally, I find that this has been a journey that reminds me once again of my many responsibilities, convincing me even more that the tribes must move on to navigate a dwindling space in time in which memory must of necessity surmount the lapses of history. For oral communities of Northeast India, these lapses have inadvertently made themselves open to vital interventions from a periphery that constitutes 8% of India's landmass. I'm talking about the Northeast. Many communities are still bound by the intangible borders of a mindscape that is deeply oral, circumscribed, however, at another level by the inevitable hegemonies of technology. And this makes for a very difficult situation, for this other landscape thrives on the agency of self-profit and self-gain. Communitarian values seem to have been dispensed with. Thus have our forests been robbed, lands plundered, and lifestyles reversed. Where then is the locus of the grassroots imagination to be found in this day and age? And what of the worldviews and knowledge systems that cannot simply be put away? We can continue talking about them, but as I said, because of the time constraints, I'll only talk about these three young women. I begin with questions that have no easy answers. And in as much as sociologists and anthropologists have been discoursing upon who a tribal is and what his or her position is in the unravelment of a country's narrative, I become more and more aware of my other disinherited and alternate history. It has empowered me in a way that I cannot rationalize or theorize about, initiated me into the multi-layered twists of the spoken word. Words chosen carefully with respect to their aura in my disinherited schemata can overcome hurdles, stay evil intentions, or perceive other worlds that exist parallel to ours. Although my literate self fought it off for a long while, words from an older generation, my grandmother, my mother, my father, my older aunts and uncles, the community itself, strongly engaged me and pulled me within the circle of a speaking universe so as to put me at a point of no return. And as Easterine Kire, the Naga writer, in one of her interviews, describes herself as being Naga first and foremost, I too see myself as a woman birthed in a culture that is wrapped in the mysteries of the spoken word. Orality was never a self-conscious outer vestment for me. It was my consciousness, implicitly so, strongly so, to be passed on to the next generation. It has been difficult to critique or structure orality in an objective way, for this is the reality upon which I have stood. And I now find that the challenge to it has become even more dire, for it has reached my doorstep in the form of family and friends who I find can no longer affiliate themselves to it because of the inevitable change in lifestyle. The oral paradigm is no longer present. Instead of the hearth around the fireplace, around which one would sit around listening to and sharing the stories that brought us together as a community at the end of the day, we are now faced with choices high-tech in nature that have no radar for the telling. An arid situation all around, as everyone understands. But if I were to go back to one of the stories from my own Khasi community, the story of Manik Raitong, I would draw hope from it, for it speaks of relocations and transformations in a metaphoric way. Manik Raitong, radical artist and lover, inadvertently drawn into a relationship with the absent king's wife, is condemned to death by burning. In full ceremonial attire, he walks backwards to the funeral pyre, all the while playing his flute. The burning pyre is said to have turned into a gushing stream, and it is believed to be even there today, somewhere in the Bhoi area, which is the lower regions of the Khasi Hills. An incredible fountainhead of memories, identifying Manik Raitong above everything else as the creator of Khasi music. As our oralities navigate reduced space within the reigning dominions of globalization, it is such reinstatements of memory that must prevail. The story of Manik Raitong, the Orpheus of Khasi society, carves out a liminal space of authenticity within other contested spaces. By its very nature, like the transformation motif in the story, the oral ruptures all physical and repressive boundaries of time and space, and also the state machinery, seeking habitation within the cracks and crevices of material reality. It now disseminates itself in the digital space of an alternate reality. A society of approximately 14 lakh Khasi speakers within a linguistic map of several small speech communities in Northeast India would seem to be, comparatively speaking, highly encouraging. But given our brief history of written transactions, just above 100 years, there is still much to be desired by way of literary histories, dictionaries, and other such compilations. And it is for this reason that Dairisa Rumnong, assistant professor of St. Mary's College, I will share screen now. She's assistant professor of St. Mary's College, Shillong. She's also a published poet, started an Instagram page called Speak Your Roots, which has amassed a large following. It is a linguistic compendium that echoes, with full intent, the root meaning of words and the sayings. They have been plucked out of threatened erasure, uploaded in a newly created web of conscious thought that projects itself through the profound semantics of words and phrases and sayings, emulating the unbroken circle of orality comprising speaker and participatory audience. The unbroken circle of orality has become a tragic artifact of history that is being addressed by affected communities in their own ways, with dismaying realization that it can never be obtained in its original paradigm. Be that as it may, orality in the digital space has its own ringeo, to use a Khasi word that we often use in discussing the psychic health of a person or a community, amongst other things, which may loosely be understood as having its own aura. That aura perpetuated in the Instagram page, Speak Your Roots, through proverbs, idioms, sayings, and words, and retold narratives, etc., induct the follower into oralities that are compounded strongly by images that underscore their meaning. Rumnong has collated a worldview that spans the speaking universe of the Khasi. I quote her in a conversation that I had with her on the 13th of September this year. I quote, "As we move into the first quarter of the 21st century, the physical hearth has gone absent from our modern homes, and we are left to imagine the embrace of the warm flames of a hearth from pictures or from books. How do we recreate that atmosphere, that feeling of being together almost as one breath and one mind, as we listen to the folk tales, legends, myths, and ponder on teachings which contain truths that we may have lost in our rush into globalization? Perhaps we can recreate the hearth by gathering our family and friends to talk about our culture, history, and language, because we need to revive the interest and love for what is our own, for what we belong to. Thus, the page itself is a hearth in a digital space, recreating the same ambience and atmosphere." Close quotes. Almost every day, Rumnong takes on the responsibility of adding onto the page, an act that is essentially communitarian in spirit, for it involves participants and contributors from all corners of the Khasi-speaking world, uploading, as it were, the seamless workings of the oral, geared in this case towards preservation and conservation. The content is unevenly distributed, as it would be in an oral framework when the overtones of memory implants choices that cannot be ignored. I move on to the next artist. Karine Joplin Langste is a visual artist whose Instagram page showcases work that is interpolated with indigenous Khasi motifs, in an oeuvre that includes diverse subjects. She keeps returning to themes that relate to her identity. When I spoke with her, she told me about her reluctance to market her paintings, for according to her, they make up important dimensions of her identity. Hence, she makes prints instead for interested buyers. Somewhere deep within the consciousness of this artist is a resistance to the unconcealed consumerism that followed close upon the colonial factor that monetized culture and profaned the sacred. Her stance is connotative of a substratum that I have referred to continually as being the oral resistant that runs stubbornly parallel to other contemporary worldviews competing to displace it. Langste understands that her art engages with the inerasable in the past. She weaves recurrent images from an oral reserve that tell their story from different angles. Hers is a disparate canvas of theme and color, brushstroke and perspective that hones in the story of a home environment that she is familiar with, chock full of other overlapping histories. What is meant by this is what she had to tell me, that when she was invited to visit her aunt in Dallas in the USA and stayed there for a few months, she found that she could not establish any connection with her environment. She ended up only with sketches of her aunt's pet. The rooster, the Khasi knife, Khasi women, monoliths, indigenous flowers, birds, and forests form unique symbols that bespeak Langste's dependence upon her surroundings. The narrative thread visualizes an environment that gives her a separate identity as a woman from a matrilineal society. This dimension she highlights through repeated portrayals of women in various situations and at various points in their lives. Their stories are projected through an assortment of paintings that depict above everything else that catches her imagination, recurring themes from the Khasi worldview that seemed destined to reach her canvas. I move on to the next artist, who is a performer, and we will be seeing the clips. Just one will be a short 2-minute clip, and the other will be a 10-minute clip of a chapter in a 5-part series. Last but not least, I would like to turn to a Khasi performer, Lapadiang Artimai Saim, who has been trying to investigate, besides everything else that she's involved in through performance, what comprises orality within Khasi society. She belongs, as I've said, to a breed of young Khasis who have had access to an eclectic education, traveled outside, but chosen to return home. What they find here when they come back, as told to me, is something unimaginably uncontained and unstructured, erstwhile hidden from them. During the pandemic, the digital space challenged traditional notions of performativity and put her onto a plane of storytelling that required her to navigate a completely different format. Addressing these issues needed flexibility in order to balance the elements of a performance, and yet in her case, maintain the dramatic speaking voice of her persona, reimagined in the course of constant studied retracings. Thus, within the intimate space of a room, she devised dialogues and dramatic communications and projections that culled out whatever technological resources she had in hand. Most importantly, however, are the resources that she, like the others, have facilitated for her community, owning its oral narratives, and therefore owning up to the implications of being a woman in a matrilineal society, critiquing dead tradition, etc., because it owns her and vice versa. The act of owning foists ownership responsibilities upon a person that exceeds all expected limits. In the case of the three young women upon whose work I have drawn, ownership has given perceptible meaning to their attempts to transcribe the oral discourse in virtual space using the means and methods that they are most attuned to. Their stories complement each other. They sometimes overlap, as they must do with the oral, adding pertinent dimensions to recollections and recreations, follow the arduous path of the oral, and negotiate a territory in cyberspace that bespeaks the spirit of orality itself. I leave you with short clips from Same's performance. The first is a brief 2-minute clip which is based upon an oral narrative about a girl called Nam. It is entitled Girl. The second clip is chapter 2 from a 5-part series entitled Nganhyar Shawa, I'm Going Down to the River, comprising stories that revolve around the river Umkra. River law constitutes an important dimension of the Khasi imagination. She situates these narratives that have come down by word of mouth against the backdrop of a dying, polluted river, desperate to be heard. The last chapter, which you may view yourselves later, since I'm going to share the links, envisions the river Umkra as a woman, beaten, betrayed, and insulted, but somehow emerging strong as ever. The performer in the last chapter, which you will not see, but you can go to the link, uses her body, which was part of her training in physical theater, as the site of the river's traumatized profile. Into the oral then has been interjected alternative notions of retelling, as the oral must survive with new envisionings and with creative assistance from its most unexpected adherents. Can we share the link now? Okay, so I'll share the link when you've seen these clips.
Snap Yaki kana pateng kana timpang Ki ong ayu ken yangi Laka ikentei Em Ushenrang Laka ikentei Em Ushenrang Ikentei Ushenrang Ikentei Ushenrang Hakakana timpang Shapanganam Ukla upa de umersiang Banlet swat Banlet ngap siar Ukwa bantip Ka iklung ayuken Gentei Neshenrang Lada idei ikentei Ukla unshim no ya I shalade Ban penhe pensan Penplung Pensngad Tip Umut banle ayuken Unila Imat utmu ban pensyat mo ya I Penbirnya ka ya I kumikun menriu Pat enda ilasan Un bam do no ya I
Okay, so we move on to the next clip, which will be about a 10-minute clip.
What is it about these boundaries? Boundaries that delineate, demarcate, and differentiate, that create worlds that are separate, that do not negotiate. Kermens Kem had been living down in the water world of Umkra with his Puri wife and children. Up until now, he had never felt a longing to return home. But something drew him up, drew him to the land of his mother. His children too wanted to see their father's land. They had only heard stories of the land above, the land of humans who walked on 2 feet on dry land. And so Kermens Kem decided to take his wife and children up beyond their world to his, to meet his mother. His wife knew she couldn't hold him back. So she carefully instructed him about specific tasks he had to perform in order to ready the house for their coming. The house had to be clean, and the broom hidden completely out of sight, because if she were so much as to get a glimpse of it, she would never be able to meet him in dry land ever again. And as for his children, they would appear in a day or 2 after her, but disguised as creatures of the world outside. And their grandmother would not recognize them immediately. She first had to truly accept them for who they are, so that they would be revealed to her in their real forms. As Kermens Kem climbed onto the rock, he reminisced about the time he had first met his Puri wife. Years had passed, and here he was, back home, back to his world. As he walked towards his house, an old woman looked up. He recognized her as his mother. She seemed unsure about him at first as he walked towards her. But as she peered into his face, she saw that it was her long-lost son who had returned. Her long-lost son had finally returned home. He told his mother about his Puri wife who would be visiting soon. She seemed hesitant about meeting a daughter-in-law who was foreign, who came from another world. Her feet were turned backwards. People would whisper about her, and the neighbors would make fun of her. How could she accept such a creature as her daughter-in-law? Nonetheless, the Puri was welcomed home and introduced to her. They were both wary of each other and felt uneasy, but their feelings were lost on Kermenskem. The three of them sat down to an awkward meal. In the course of the meal, his wife dropped a few grains on the floor. Kisok hoja. Her mother-in-law seemed displeased, but ignored it at first. But as the Puri continued to clumsily drop even more grains, her mother-in-law picked up a broom to sweep the fallen grains, forgetting her son's warning. And the Puri vanished into thin air. How strange, thought Kermen's mother. But perhaps she was secretly happy that the Puri had left them. It was early morning when Kermenskem's mother was pounding the rice. Two butterflies emerged out of the water. The people who saw them spoke about their strange beauty, so captivating and enchanting. The two butterflies appeared tired, hovered for a while by their grandmother, and sat at the edge of her thlong. Their grandmother, not knowing who they were, was aghast at seeing these two strange creatures. She took up her sinrei and with a quick, sharp move, pounded them to death. Kermen watched all this before him in a state of shock. It had all happened too fast and too quick for him to intervene, for him to save his children. With a wild cry, he scooped up the butterflies and ran. Ran like a madman towards the Umkra, towards the water world of his children and his wife. He reached his rock and laid them down in the water and wept.
I'll share the links with all of you. Yeah, this is the link that I would like to share with all of you. The first is Dairisa Rumnong's Speak Your Roots. The second is the visual artist, Karine Langste. And the third one is the performer, Lapadang Singh. I had actually missed out. Puri in Khasi means water nymph. And the Sinray is the pestle, you know, when you pound rice in a mortar. Well, Ivy, I hope what I had to say has been able to communicate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It was indeed a very engaging presentation. And the three women, the young women artists that you mentioned, Dairisa Rungnon, her Instagram page, how she's trying to create that page of Speak Your Roots and, recreating the half that has been left through the digital media. And Karine Jumpling Lungspe that you mentioned, and her beautiful paintings that she's made with the familiarity of her environment that she engages with. And the last animation film that we saw, that was so beautiful and moving for all of us. Thank you so much, ma'am, for connecting us with this world. I would now request Ivy ma'am, if you would like to say a few words, thank ma'am for her presentation.
Yes. Esther, what can I say? This was totally unexpected. I thought that you would give a conventional talk, but you have taken us into a different world. So I don't have any words to express the beauty of what I saw. It is extremely beautiful and so very different. So much music and beauty, and also sorrow in all of this. So thank you very much from my heart. Yes. And now I think we will go on to the reports. The students are going to present the reports, and then we will have the vote of thanks.
That I would like to invite Vasundhara. She will read out the report.
Hello, everyone. I am very sure I won't be able to do justice just by reading the report, because we'll be missing out on a lot of points and lot of digital videos and photographs that all our presenters shared. But I'll try to summarize everything for you. So we'll start with yesterday's session, the first session, where the head of the department, Professor Simi Malhotra, welcomed the guests. The conference convener, Dr. Ivy Hasda, introduced the theme of the conference. And then in the keynote address, Professor Anvita Abdi takes a telescopic as well as a microscopic view of tribal languages and the overall conditions in which such languages, such a language is embroiled in. She particularly emphasizes on the need of intergenerational transfer of language and the scope of digitization in the preservation of the same. Professor Asaduddin, the Dean, delivered the presidential address pointing out the significance of the theme of the conference. He also covered some parts of Northeast and how the languages are negotiating there. Then we moved to the second session, where we had two paper presentations. The session was chaired by Professor Anand Mahanan. Then Professor Peter Anderson presented a very beautiful presentation, and he talked about the importance of folklore in Santhali tribe for its historical consciousness and for the perpetuation of folk tradition among Santhals by the folklorists. On one hand, digitization of folklore has helped disseminate high level of fiction and creative writing. On the other hand, internet has opened itself up for numerous other permutations and combinations. by giving access to everyone. So hence producing unidentified informants that might intrude in our research study. He also talks about how in the new age, new kind of folklore is built through digital media. And probably in the coming years, we will get to hear or read about them. The third point that he makes is researchers should consider the importance of internet-based communication that has resulted in the production of new cultures and subcultures. Then we move to the second presentation, which was made by Professor Indraneel Acharya. He mainly talks about many folk forms, folk performances based in Bengal. The three important points that he makes, non-representation of indigenous performers and the alienation of traditional performance from the mainstream resulting from the discrimination, deliberate omission, state apathy, and other political reasons like the absence of government funding. He goes on and makes the second point. The politics of exclusion at work dismisses the relationship between the threatened performance of tradition and the contemporary need, which requires equal attention and evaluation. And lastly, there is the tradition of neglect working among with the experimentation done with folk performances, which has raised questions regarding the purity of folk tradition and art. Digitization has attempted at preserving oral tradition performances through documentation. His work was very interesting, where he did a lot of field work and came to all these conclusions. Now moving on to today's session, we are moving to the third session, which was in the morning around 11 o'clock. The theme of the session was Indigenous Identity and its Survival in the Digital Era. It was chaired by Ms. Vandana Tete. There were three presentations made, one by Ms. Mridula Kindu, the other was by A.K. Pankaj, and the third was by Sundar Manoj Hindu. Mridula ma'am spoke about the various departments that cater to tribal studies over India, a thorough overview that not only benefits the academicians but also new scholars who are interested in learning through distance mode. She elaborated the advantages of the digital learning technology, which is the need of the hour, considering it is much more accessible to students all over the country. Then we move on to the second presentation, which was by Sundar Manoj Hembrom. He discussed about how tribal memory can be preserved through collective memory. He gave various examples of organizations working towards preserving the tribal narrative through digital media. Some examples that he gave were of Johar Journal, Jharkhandi Bhasha Sahitya Akhara, and his own project with Boro Basti that is titled Adivasi Nostalgia, series of songs of bygone days. Then we move to the third presentation by A.K. Pankaj. A.K. Pankaj, in his candid and heartfelt talks, spoke about the relevance of voices of Adivasi community to be in the forefront of the academic and intellectual circle pertaining to tribal studies. He strongly advocated adding text, memoirs, philosophy that comes from their ancestors in order to change their self-image. Then we move to the last session, which was few hours ago, portrayal of the indigenous tribal in Indian cinema and mass media. This session was chaired by Professor Tharakeshwar, and there were three presentations made in the session, one by Dr. Gomti Bodra, other was by Professor Nikla, and the third presentation was made by Dr. Maka Shelter. Professor Gomti Bodra, in her presentation, talked about the emergence of new wave cinema and the representation of Adivasi women. She pointed out the mainstream cinema of the post-independence era that did not have any visual engagement with the tribal society in general due to its focus on bourgeois society. However, the new wave cinema made by Ray, Karnad, Satyu, others shifted from a bourgeois sensibility of entertainment to focus on issue-centric representation. She particularly focused on Mrinal Sen's Mrigaya, Govind Nihalani's Akrosh, and the movie Kamla. She said that cinematic realities are often realities of power, which further complicate tribal women because they are situated in a doubly disadvantaged position. The next presentation was made by Professor Nikhila. She tried to engage with the reasons that lead to cinematic representation of tribal communities as displaced or alienated victims in independent India. For this, she chose 3 South Indian films as case studies. In the Malayalam, Tamil, and Telugu films, she tries to analyze how filmmakers resolve the question of what it means to be a tribal in India, especially from a cinematic lens. While the Telugu film Kamli and Malayalam film Papilio Buddha are set in contemporary times, the Tamil film Aryan is set in 18th century British times. While these 4 South Indian films articulate the question of being a tribe differently, but these films offer a critical perspective on the question of identity in India. These films do not try to resolve the problem faced by tribal society, but they present a more realistic portrayal of problems that are continuously being inflicted upon the tribal community. And lastly, the last presentation was by Dr. Marcus. In his ethnographic reading of popular Santhali music culture, Professor Marcus discussed various songs and music videos in Santhali language. In these videos, Santhali music being the medium of articulation of their everyday culture, Santhali music video being released on YouTube makes it open to global audience, which is very encouraging in the digital era. These videos provide a creative exchange and bring in a new kind of cultural representation of the marginalized communities. And in the last valedictory session, we just heard Professor Esther. She talked about 3 young women who are through different social media handles, be it Instagram or be it through performance art, they are reclaiming their identity. So with this, I end the report. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you, Kanupriya.
Thank you so much, Vasundhara. And I would like to invite Ivy ma'am for a vote of thanks, a formal vote of thanks. And then we have our head of the department, who's always been throughout with us through the support. Ma'am, you could also please say a few words, Cindy ma'am and Ivy ma'am.
Thank you. So this is the end of a very, very interesting conference. I have organized 3 of them, and this I think has been the most interesting in many ways. So I would first like to begin by thanking the Vice Chancellor of the university because of Jamia Millia Islamia, because she gave her support, she approved, and then afterwards, of course, we went on to start the work. And then I would also like to thank the Dean, Professor Asaduddin, for his support and for being here on the first day for the inaugural session and for delivering the presidential address. And I would also like to thank the head of the English department, Professor Simi Malhotra, who has been she's also a good friend, but besides this, she's been so supportive throughout. And her team has worked with my students. My students at the beginning, they also did not know much, but as a result of this conference, they have learned so much. And now I think they have learned a lot. And her team working with my team, it brought all of this together, because this is something which I thought would be very complex, but it turned out to be so, it was so easy in some ways. It seemed to just work on its own. It was so good. They all seem to know all the inner integrities of doing all this kind of work. And after that, I would like to thank the speakers whom I invited, and all of them, they came and they made their wonderful presentations in different areas. And there was a lot of diversity in this, but then again, there was this common engagement. I mean, all of them with the theme, the main theme or theme of the talk of the conference. So it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience, all of you, and the chairs also. I would like to thank them, and yes, I would finally like to thank the students. So we saw Vasundhara and Kanupriya throughout these 2 days, and you can all agree with me that they've done a wonderful job. They have been comparing and they have been assisting in many other ways. But behind the scenes also there were other people involved. So there were the rapporteurs, and then there were other team members, and there was also Irfan Bhai in the English department. He also was trying to help sometimes. So there was the staff, Irfan Bhai. So all these people, they all work together, and this is what made this conference run so smoothly. And though we've never done this, I've never done this before as a webinar on the web, but it turned out to be so good. So what can I say? I'm extremely happy. So that is it. Thank you all of you. My thanks to all of you. You've all contributed. You've all contributed to this. I'm not the only person. You've all contributed to this.
So, if I could just step in and can I please speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think nobody is going to thank actually the intellectual force and the real force behind this conference. That's Dr. Ivy Imogen Hansdag. And so I think it is my proud honor and my privilege and my pleasure actually to thank Ivy for this absolutely brilliant and absolutely fantastic conference. Ivy, I've attended many conferences, but this is a unique conference, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's kind of validated by the fact that whosoever Ivy invited, everybody agreed and wanted to be part of that. So on behalf of the Department of English, I'm extremely grateful to all the speakers, to all the chairs who've given their valuable time and also shared their scholarship so generously with us. I mean, we all stand enriched so much through the presentations and the interventions also which have been made by everybody. I'm really, really grateful to all the speakers. I mean, for me, it has been one of the best conferences that I've attended, and it's been extremely enriching. And of course, the credit goes to all the speakers, but primarily to Ivy for actually putting this together, for thinking of this theme. I mean, we'll stay indebted to Ivy, and we hope that this will probably come out in some sort of a book form, because this is something which must be circulated and which must stay, as some sort of a resource on which researchers can work on. And of course, I must thank Vasundhara and Kanupriya. I'm of course, I've always been a big fan of both of them, but I mean, I think now, as Ivy said, that they've done it all, and I'm so grateful to both of them. We can learn so much from both of them in terms of so many things, not just in terms of organizing, but as people. So thank you so much, Kanupriya and Vasundhara, and of course your team of rapporteurs and all the people who were in the audience. I mean, their commitment and passion for this conference is validated by the fact that they've stayed through. And I mean, I've been sharing almost like a kid with Ivy the number of views that we've had also on YouTube, which just shows that it's such an important conference, and there are so many people who do want to know what is being discussed, and I think there can be no greater, tribute to a conference which actually engages people and gets them to think and to, share their ideas. So I'm really, really grateful to everybody, to the students, to all the participants, to all the speakers, to all the chairs, mostly to Ivy for such a wonderful conference, Ivy. We're really, really grateful to you. The department stays grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.